I am happy to join with you today.
In 1967, Dr. King predicted America's future. They called him radical. They called him dangerous. But they were wrong about one thing. His predictions were disturbingly accurate. In this video, we will talk about 5 shockingly accurate predictions of Dr. King. Stay with us till the end, because the last prediction will blow your mind. Most people remember "I have a dream," but very few remember the speech that got him condemned, the speech that made newspapers turn against him, the speech that may have sealed his fate. April 4th, 1967, 1 year before he was assassinated, at Riverside Church in New York City, Dr. King delivered a speech called "Beyond Vietnam." It wasn't poetic, it was prophetic, and it reads like tomorrow's headlines. Prediction number 1, the downward spiral of militarism. In 1967, America was pouring billions into the war in Vietnam. Young men were drafted straight out of high school and sent into jungles thousands of miles away. The government promised the war would stop communism, protect democracy, and prevent the so-called domino effect across Asia. The government assured the public that victory was near, that progress was being made. Americans paid with their taxes. Many paid with their sons. What did it cost? Rising costs, inflation, social programs being strained. Then the Pentagon Papers exposed years of deception, and trust in government fractured. Dr. King saw something most refused to confront, that the bombs dropped in Vietnam were also exploding in American neighborhoods, draining resources from the poor while military spending expanded. Fast forward, today, the United States spends more on its military than the next 9 countries combined. After Vietnam came Iraq and Afghanistan, 2 decades, trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives lost, hundreds of thousands of civilians dead. Once again, Americans were told it was about security, about freedom, about threats that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, veterans returned to overwhelmed healthcare systems. Student debt climbed past $1.7 trillion. Homelessness rose in major cities. Wages stagnated while defense budgets grew year after year. When King warned that a nation choosing bombs over bread was approaching spiritual death, he wasn't predicting a sudden collapse. He was describing a slow erosion, a shift in priorities so gradual that it begins to feel normal. The question is not whether Vietnam ended. The question is whether the pattern ever did. Prediction number 2, endless global intervention. Dr. King didn't just warn against one war. He warned against a pattern. A pattern where a nation uses its military not as emergency medicine, but as a constant tool of power projection. After Vietnam, it didn't stop. It evolved. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. Each invasion wrapped in familiar language: security, freedom, stability. But the outcome was the same: more missions, more broken promises, and the world dotted with US bases. Today, that pattern has morphed into something almost unrecognizable from the values once claimed. In early January 2026, the United States struck Caracas, captured Venezuela's president, and flew him to New York to face charges. A move many nations called a violation of sovereignty. Even as Washington claims counter-narcotics missions, US forces have carried out lethal strikes on vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, leaving dozens dead in operations framed as security, but interpreted by critics as extrajudicial killings. This isn't isolated. It isn't defensive. It's not restraint. It's a new phase where force is justified before threat, where intervention comes before diplomacy, and where military power shapes global order rather than serves human lives. Dr. King saw it coming. He understood that when a nation defines its role as perpetual intervention, not negotiation, not restraint, it doesn't protect a world, it administers it. He wasn't just anti-war, he was anti-empire. And today, the pattern he warned about is no longer theory, it's reality. Prediction number 3. Loss of moral authority. In 1967, that sentence detonated across the country. Newspapers attacked him. Politicians distanced themselves. Even allies said he had gone too far. To call the United States the greatest source of violence in the world during the Cold War wasn't just controversial, it was unthinkable. But King wasn't speaking emotionally, he was speaking structurally. He was pointing to a nation that claimed moral superiority while dropping bombs overseas. Fast forward to today. War is no longer something Americans only read about in morning papers. It arrives instantly. Drone strike footage, satellite images, civilian casualties recorded in real time, entire cities reduced to rubble and streamed across social media within minutes. Guantanamo Bay still operates decades later. The images from Abu Ghraib never disappeared. Sanctions imposed on foreign governments often collapse economies, destabilize currencies, and punish civilians long before leaders feel the pressure. King warned that without what he called a radical revolution of values, the nation would lose its moral credibility. Not because enemies would defeat it, but because its actions would contradict its principles. Look at global perception surveys today. Trust in American leadership has fluctuated wildly over the last 2 decades. Allies question reliability. Rivals frame U.S. intervention as hypocrisy. Anti-American sentiment rises not only in adversarial states, but in regions once considered secure partners. King was not predicting a dramatic collapse. He was predicting consequence, the inevitable result of proclaiming peace while practicing power without restraint. Moral authority cannot be enforced by aircraft carriers. It has to be earned, and once it is questioned, it is far harder to reclaim than territory. Prediction number 4. Poverty sacrificed for war. When King said that, he meant federal dollars meant for the war on poverty were being redirected into Vietnam. Schools, housing, and healthcare were competing with artillery and airstrikes. He warned that the poor were being asked to sacrifice twice, first through neglect at home, then through service abroad. Now look at today. The United States is the largest economy in the world. Yet, according to a 2023 Federal Reserve survey, over 60% of Americans say they are living paycheck to paycheck, and nearly 40% would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense. The top 10% hold roughly 70% of the nation's wealth. CEO compensation has risen more than 1,000% since the late 1970s, while average wages have barely kept pace with inflation. HUD estimates more than 500,000 people experience homelessness on any given night. Meanwhile, U.S. defense spending exceeds $800 billion annually. The poverty King described did not disappear, it modernized. So here's the question his warning leaves us with. If, in 1967, war spending was destroying the hopes of the poor, what do we call it when the richest nation on earth still leaves most of its people struggling to make ends meet? Is that power, or is it priority? Prediction number 5. Nonviolent coexistence, or violent co-annihilation. In 1967, the fear was nuclear annihilation, the Cold War, missiles on hair trigger alert. The possibility that one decision could erase entire cities. In 2026, the fear hasn't disappeared, it has multiplied. Nuclear tensions are rising again between major powers. Modern arsenals are more advanced, more precise, more automated. And at home, political polarization in the United States is at levels researchers describe as the highest in decades. Trust in institutions has fallen sharply. Families fracture over ideology. King warned that delayed justice, postponed accountability, leads to what he called a long, dark, and shameful night. Because violent co-annihilation doesn't only mean nuclear fire, it can mean the collapse of civic trust and the inability to coexist without viewing one another as enemies. Dr. King wasn't condemned for a dream. He was condemned when he challenged war, inequality, and power itself. The version we celebrate is comfortable. The real King was not. We replay his speeches, we talk about his dream, we honor his legacy, but we ignore his warnings. So here's the question. If he delivered the same message today about militarism, poverty, and moral decay, would we honor him? Or would we silence him again?